would need to have either a ground invasion
to hit Israel in a way that it's never been hit in its history.
Iran wishes to destroy the international sanctions.
there is a deal this year is likely to be, I'm afraid, very beneficial to Iran.
I think a deal is possible, but it's going to be very difficult.
I don't think it can be exactly the same deal because a lot has happened since then. The Iranian program has advanced considerably. For all practical purposes, they've broken out of it, and they are, in essence, a threshold nuclear state today.
The negotiations have been such a mess. And from the point of view of Israel and its Gulf allies, it's a very, very difficult position to be in. The first thing they did was to table an offer to the Iranians that was so generous that the Iranians almost didn't believe it. And currently, it feels like the American administration is more concerned with rehabilitating Obama's legacy and erasing the influence of Trump than it is with the global security, particularly of the Middle East.
The Biden administration has been rather clear and consistent. They believe that the return to a nuclear deal removes the potential of an Iranian nuclear weapon. Many people disagree with that.
From the beginning, President Biden telegraphed to the world, even before he was elected, that his intention was to do a deal with Iran almost at any cost. He wrote a piece for CNN before he was elected, promising to get a deal done. Fast forward to when he was elected, and he installed Robert Malley to lead the negotiations, and he had a reputation for being really the softest of the soft when it came to Iran.
The program passed the point where it could be destroyed, in the sense of being completely destroyed.
In order to take it out fully, you would need to have either a ground invasion or probably the biggest air campaign since the Second World War. And for either of those options, there's only one country in the world who has the capability to carry it out, and that's the United States of America. And currently, it's not even willing to suggest it as an option, let alone.
Let's say that you launched a 100% successful attack and destroyed every one of the nuclear facilities. At this point, the Iranians have the technological know-how, and they can reconstitute it.
Is that it would be pretty much impossible for Israel to do this alone. Israel has a great capability in terms of its sabotage and espionage via the Mossad, and can achieve a certain degree of influence there by delaying the program.
I don't think that Israel would act militarily except as a last resort. And at that point, as a last resort, and in the worst case scenario, I think Israel will have to do it, but the amount of time that will be gained is quite limited, and there will be a heavy price to pay for it.
The scale of the Iranian nuclear program, the way it's dotted around the country, often in civilian areas, and the depth to which it's buried around the country means that in order to take it out fully,
well, the Iranians will respond. I think that's self-evident. They will have little choice but to respond. And they built up a dramatic capability in the form of Hezbollah and some of their own direct capabilities, but mostly through Hezbollah, to hit Israel in a way that it's never been hit in its history. The question is, do they decide to limit their response just to Israel? Do they maybe expanded a bit to some of the other regional actors. My understanding of what is happening is that the real reason that we see the Saudis and the UAE talking to Iran today is a lack of confidence that they truly have American backing, that the American commitment to their security may not be quite as strong as it was in the past. Well, I think diplomacy is always preferable. And since I don't think we have any really good options for dealing with the Iranian issue, of the bad options available, it's the least bad, or it's the best of the bad.
You know, I think in the end, sadly, the negotiations do seem to be working on Iran's terms. And there are various other indications that Britain is really more closely aligned with Israeli interests currently, certainly in terms of negotiations, than the United States. Given that the Americans aren't responding to Israeli pressure, the Israelis are finding more common ground with the United Kingdom, which at the moment is holding a harder line at the negotiation table. You know, having beneficial links with Russia and China and you know, deepening and strengthening those, the threat of sanctions is not as devastating as it was back when Obama first signed the deal.
Iran wishes to destroy the international sanctions regime in its entirety. Putin and the Iranians wish to dominate their near neighborhood in a way that reshapes that topography. And finally, each wishes to cripple the ability of the United States to do anything in the future against their aggression.
Does Iran benefit at all from the waivers that were signed?
You will need to ask the Iranian government whether they think this is a benefit to them.
Well,
I think that story was really about Robert Malley and the team underneath him rather than Biden himself. Robert Malley, although there is a lot of disagreement and hostility amongst members of his team, he reports to Anthony Blinken, who then reports to Joe Biden. And so Malley is able to craft the narrative of how the negotiations are going in his own words, with his own spin on it, to Blinken, who then passes on to Biden, who generally is quite distracted by domestic agenda anyway. And so the feeling I get is that the actual White House is not really aware of the depth and the extent of the problem with the negotiations and how badly they've been going so far.